The room went silent when the janitor spoke. 3 words. That's all it took to freeze a room full of millionaires. She's with me. Nobody laughs at a man holding secrets that could ruin you. Nobody sneers when the invisible become undeniable. In a world where power is currency and cruelty is casual, Ethan Cole had spent years being nobody, until the night he chose not to be. This is the story of what happens when dignity meets arrogance head-on. When a single father's quiet strength shatters the glass towers of the elite, and when 3 words rewrite everything. Stay until the end. Hit like. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the mechanical room buzzed like trapped wasps. Ethan Cole crouched beside the commercial refrigeration unit, grease smeared across his knuckles, sweat beading on his forehead despite the manufactured cold. His toolbox sat open beside him like a metal mouth, wrenches and screwdrivers scattered across the concrete floor in organized chaos. "Hand me the 7/16, Lil." His daughter sat cross-legged against the wall, her sneakers worn thin at the toes, her backpack serving as a cushion against the cinder block. She was 8, too young to be spending Friday night in the bowels of a restaurant that cost more per plate than Ethan made in a day. But babysitters cost money, and money was a thing they managed carefully, like rationing water in a desert. Lily didn't complain. She never did. She dug through the toolbox with the confidence of a child who'd done this 100 times, her small fingers wrapping around the correct wrench without hesitation. "This one? That's my girl." The compressor rattled again, a death-throw wheeze that meant someone upstairs was about to lose several $1,000s worth of premium ingredients if Ethan didn't fix it in the next 20 minutes. He'd gotten the call at 6:47 p.m., right as he was plating spaghetti for Lily. The voice on the phone had been tight with panic. "Mr. Cole? This is Bellamy's. We need you here immediately. The walk-in is failing." Bellamy's, where senators ate. Where tech moguls close deals over Wagyu and wine that cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. He'd arrived in 15 minutes, Lily buckled in the passenger seat of his decade-old truck, still wearing her school clothes because there hadn't been time to change. "How much longer, Dad?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. He twisted the wrench, felt the bolt give. "You doing okay?" "I'm hungry." "I know, baby. We'll get burgers on the way home." "Can I get a milkshake?" He glanced at her. Her hair needed brushing. Her jacket had a stain on the sleeve from art class. She was looking at him with those eyes that trusted him completely, that believed Dad could fix anything. Refrigerators, broken toys, bad days, empty stomachs. "Yeah," he said. "You can get a milkshake." Her smile was worth every dollar he didn't have. The compressor coughed, sputtered, then hummed back to life with a steady mechanical purr. Ethan sat back on his heels, exhaled, fixed. He began gathering his tools, wiping his hands on a rag that had long ago surrendered to permanent grime. "Come on, kiddo. Let's get out of here." They took the service elevator up. It was slower than the main lifts, rattling in its shaft like loose change in a tin can. When the doors opened on the first floor, they stepped into a different world. Marble, crystal. The kind of lighting that made everything look softer, more expensive. A hostess station that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. Through the archway, he could see the dining room. White tablecloths, candlelight, people dressed like they were attending the opera. He felt Lily's hand slip into his. "We're just passing through," he murmured. "Straight to the front." But the manager intercepted them. A thin man in a suit that fit too well, his expression caught between relief and discomfort. "Mr. Cole, you fixed it." "Good as new. Might want to schedule a full maintenance check next month, though. That compressor's running on borrowed time." "Yes, of course." The manager pulled out his phone, tapped at the screen. "I'm sending your payment now, the usual rate plus the emergency fee." "Appreciate it." The manager's eyes flicked to Lily, then away. "You can exit through the kitchen if you'd prefer." Translation: "Don't let the paying customers see the help." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Sure." They turned towards the kitchen corridor, but Lily tugged on his hand. "Dad, I need to use the bathroom." The manager shifted his weight. "The staff restroom is—" "She's 8, Ethan said quietly. "The guest bathroom is closer." A pause. The manager's professional smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes did. "Of course." Just through there, second door on the right. Lily hurried off. Ethan stood in the corridor, toolbox in hand, out of place as a wrench in a jewelry store. From the dining room, laughter spilled out, the easy, careless kind that comes from never having worried about money, never having chosen between fixing the truck and fixing the heat. He heard their voices before he saw them. Did you see what she was wearing? Tory Burch. Last season. Tragic. More laughter. Ethan glanced through the archway. A table of 4, 2 men, 2 women, all in their 40s, all dressed in the uniform of wealth, understated but unmistakable. One of the men was gesturing with his wine glass, his Rolex catching the light. And the car, a Lexus, not even the new model. Some people simply don't understand that if you can't afford to keep up, you shouldn't try. They weren't cruel people, Ethan thought. Not really. Just people who'd never had to think about what it meant to keep up, to fall behind, to be invisible. They were commenting on someone else's inadequacy, the way you might comment on the weather, casually, without malice, because it didn't occur to them that inadequacy might be listening. Then he saw her. A woman at the bar, mid-30s maybe, sitting alone. Her dress was nice but not expensive. Her jewelry was real but modest. She was checking her phone with the nervous energy of someone waiting for a text that wasn't coming, and every few seconds, her eyes would dart toward the table of 4. One of them was supposed to meet her. Ethan could read it in her posture. She'd been stood up. The maitre d' approached her, spoke quietly. Her face went pale. She nodded, stood, and walked toward the exit with her chin up and her hands shaking. As she passed the table of 4, one of the women looked up. "Oh, Jennifer." The woman, Jennifer, stopped. "We didn't see you there. Are you dining alone?" Yes, change of plans." The woman's smile was sympathetic in the way a shark's might be. "Well, you look lovely. Don't let anyone tell you last season isn't still perfectly acceptable." Jennifer's face went from pale to red. She mumbled something and fled. The table erupted in laughter. Ethan felt his grip tighten on the toolbox handle. "Dad!" Lily was back, tugging on his sleeve. He looked down at her, forced his shoulders to relax. "Ready to go?" "Yeah." They walked through the kitchen, a choreographed chaos of chefs and line cooks, steam and fire, and shouted orders. No one looked at them. They exited through the back door, into the alley where Ethan's truck was parked beside the dumpsters. The night air was cold. Lily climbed into the passenger seat, buckled herself in. Ethan slid behind the wheel, sat there for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. "Dad? Are you okay?" He looked at her. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay." "Those people were mean." "Yeah, they were." Why were they laughing at that lady? How do you explain cruelty to a child who doesn't understand it yet? How do you teach them that some people measure their own worth by diminishing others? "Because they're scared," he said finally. "Of what?" "Of being her." Lily frowned, processing. Then, "I don't like them." "Me neither." He started the truck. It coughed, protested, then rumbled to life. They pulled out of the alley, away from Bellamy's, away from marble and crystal and people who laughed at the wrong things. But Ethan couldn't shake the image of Jennifer's face, the humiliation, the casual cruelty. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something he was meant to see. 3 hours later, after burgers and a milkshake, after tucking Lily into bed and reading her 2 chapters of the book they'd been working through together, Ethan stood in his kitchen washing grease from under his fingernails. His apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened onto a living room barely big enough for a couch and a TV. The building was old enough that the radiators clanked and the windows didn't quite seal, letting in drafts that made the utility bills spike every winter. But it was theirs. He dried his hands, walked to Lily's room, cracked the door. She was asleep, her breathing soft and even, her hand curled around the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. His phone buzzed. A text from the manager at Bellamy's. "We have another event tomorrow night, corporate banquet. May need you on standby in case of any issues. Double rate." Ethan hesitated. Tomorrow was Saturday. He'd planned to take Lily to the park, maybe catch a matinee if the budget allowed. But double rate was double rate. He texted back. "I'll be there." Another buzz. Appreciated. 7 p.m. And Mr. Cole, dress code is business casual for the event. If you're on site, we ask that you blend in. Blend in. Ethan looked down at his jeans, his work boots, the flannel shirt with someone else's name still stitched above the pocket because he'd bought it secondhand. Blend in. He didn't own business casual, didn't own anything that would let him blend in at a place like Bellamy's when it wasn't a mechanical emergency. But he owned a clean button-down, a pair of slacks he'd worn to his brother's wedding 3 years ago. Shoes that weren't boots. It would have to be enough. Saturday arrived like every other day, too early and too loud. Lily bounded into his room at 6:30 a.m., already dressed, already talking a mile a minute about pancakes and the park, and could they please stop at the library because there was a new book she wanted. "We can't do the park today, Lil." She stopped mid-sentence. "Why not?" "I have to work tonight. Big event at the restaurant." Her face fell. Not dramatically, not with tears or tantrums. Just a quiet kind of disappointment that hurt worse than any meltdown could. "But you said—" "I know, I'm sorry, but it's good money, and we need it." She nodded, 8 years old and already understanding that need trumped want. "Can I come with you?" "It's a fancy event, baby. I don't think—" "Please? I'll bring my homework. I'll be quiet, I promise." He looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, at the kid who never asked for much, who spent Friday nights in mechanical rooms and never complained. "Okay," he said, "but you have to stay out of sight. Deal?" "Deal." They spent the morning at the library. Lily picked out 3 books, one about dinosaurs, one about space, one about a girl who solved mysteries with her dog. Ethan sat beside her in the children's section, reading the news on his phone, trying to ignore the knot of unease in his stomach. Bellamy's. Another night of watching people who had everything treated like nothing. Why did it bother him so much? He'd been doing this work for 15 years, ever since dropping out of community college to take care of Lily when her mother left. He'd worked every kind of job: mechanic, handyman, janitor, contractor. He'd fixed toilets in mansions and rewired lights in penthouse apartments. He'd been invisible to the people who lived in those places, and it had never bothered him before. But something about last night stuck with him. Jennifer's face, the laughter. "Dad? You okay?" Lily was watching him, her book closed in her lap. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About people. Are they mean again?" "Some of them." She considered this. Grammy says mean people are just sad people wearing masks. His mother. Dead 5 years now, but still present in the things she'd taught them. Grammy was smart. Yeah, Lily agreed. She was. They arrived at Bellamy's at 6:45 p.m. The restaurant had been transformed. The dining room was set up for a banquet. Long tables arranged in a U-shape, place settings that looked like they belonged in a museum, centerpieces of white roses and gold accents. The manager met them at the service entrance, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. We're expecting about 60 guests. Everything should run smoothly, but we want you on standby. You can wait in the staff area. We'll call if we need you." "Understood." The manager's eyes flicked to Lily. "And your daughter?" "She'll stay with me. Won't be any trouble." A pause. Then, "Very well. Keep her out of sight, please." They were led to a small room off the kitchen, barely more than a closet, really, with a folding table and 2 chairs. The sounds of the kitchen filtered through the walls, muffled but constant. Lily set up her homework on the table, pulled out her books and pencils with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Ethan sat beside her, scrolling through his phone, half listening to the sounds of the event beginning in the next room. Voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. At 7:30, someone knocked on the door. A young woman in a server's uniform, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling. "Are you the technician?" "Yeah. Something wrong?" "No, I just—" She pressed a hand to her mouth. Sorry, I'm fine. They just wanted me to let you know everything's running smoothly so far." She wasn't fine. Ethan stood. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm fine," she said again, but her voice cracked on the word. "Did something happen?" She shook her head, tried to smile, failed. It's nothing, just some of the guests are... they're... She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They're assholes, Ethan said quietly. A startled laugh burst out of her. Yeah, they are. You want to sit down for a minute? Catch your breath? She glanced over her shoulder toward the kitchen. I can't. I have tables to... I need to... 30 seconds, Ethan said. Sit. She sat, pressed her palms to her eyes, breathed. What's your name? Mara. I'm Ethan. That's Lily. Lily waved from her homework. Hi, Mara whispered. Who upset you? Ethan asked. It doesn't matter. It matters. She looked at him then, really looked, like she was trying to figure out if he meant it. There's this one table, she said finally. Investors, tech people. They keep sending food back. Not because it's wrong, just because they can. And her voice dropped. One of them keeps calling me sweetheart and honey and asking if I'm an actress because girls like you don't usually do this kind of work. Ethan felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling from last night. You want me to talk to him? She blinked. What? I can talk to him, politely. Just let him know he's being a dick. No, you'll get in trouble, and I need this job. Then let me know if it gets worse, okay? She nodded, stood. Thank you for listening. Anytime. She left. Ethan sat back down, his hands curled into fists on his thighs. Lily was watching him. Dad? Yeah, baby. You look angry. I'm not angry. You look angry, he exhaled. Some people don't know how to treat other people. It bothers me. Grammy says you can't fix everyone. No, he agreed. You can't. But you could fix what was in front of you. You could fix the things that were broken when someone had the courage to ask for help. At 8:15, the kitchen door swung open and a chef appeared, tall, stressed, flour on his apron. You the tech guy? Yeah. Oven's acting up, temperature's fluctuating. Can you look at it? Ethan glanced at Lily. You good here for a few minutes? Uh-huh. He followed the chef into the kitchen. The heat hit him first, a wall of it, the air thick with garlic and seared meat and something sweet he couldn't identify. Line cooks moved with choreographed precision, plating dishes, calling out orders, a symphony of controlled chaos. The oven in question was a commercial-grade behemoth, all steel and dials and temperamental electronics. What's it doing? Ethan asked. Jumps from 350 to 400 without warning. We've got soufflés in there. If the temp spikes again, they're ruined. Ethan crouched, opened the control panel. Wiring, thermocouples, a system that looked like it had been maintained by someone who didn't know what they were doing. How long do I have? 15 minutes. 20 if you're a miracle worker. I'll see what I can do. Matwa. He worked quickly, tracing wires, testing connections, finding the loose thermocouple that was feeding bad data to the control board. He tightened it, recalibrated the sensor, closed the panel. Try it now. The chef adjusted the temperature dial. The oven hummed, settled, held steady at 350. You're a miracle worker. Just thorough. He washed his hands at the industrial sink, dried them on a towel that smelled like bleach. Through the kitchen doors, he could hear the event in full swing, voices raised in conversation, laughter, the occasional burst of applause. Big crowd tonight? He asked. Corporate banquet, the chef said. Tech company. They bought out the whole restaurant. Boss is trying to impress the CEO. She's someone important? Victoria Lang runs Lang Tech. You know, the AI company? Worth about $3 billion, give or take. Ethan didn't know. Didn't follow tech news or billionaire lists. But he nodded anyway. Good for her. He headed back toward the staff room, passing through a narrow corridor that ran parallel to the dining area. Voices filtered through the wall, clear now, close. A woman's voice, sharp and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. This partnership represents a significant step forward for Langtech, and I'm thrilled to have you all here to celebrate. Applause. Ethan kept walking, but then another voice cut through the noise. Male, loud, slurred, just enough to suggest too much wine. Victoria, before we continue, I have a question. A pause. The woman, Victoria, responded with careful politeness. Of course, Richard. Your assistant, the one who brought the contracts earlier. Is she always this incompetent, or is tonight special? Laughter rippled through the room. Not everyone, but enough. Ethan stopped walking. I'm sorry? Victoria's voice had gone cold. She handed me the wrong document, made me look foolish in front of my team. I'm just wondering if Langtech's standards have slipped, or if this is a reflection of your leadership. Silence now. The bad kind. Then Victoria, her voice tight. I apologize for the confusion, Richard. I'll address it with her personally. See that you do. More laughter. Smaller now. Uncomfortable. Ethan's jaw clenched. He should keep walking. Should get back to Lily, stay out of it, do his job, and go home. But he didn't. He pushed through the kitchen doors into the dining room. The space was stunning. Chandeliers, candlelight, 60 people in suits and dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At the center of the U-shaped table arrangement stood a woman in her late 40s. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, blonde hair pulled back in a way that said she didn't have time for anything that wasn't essential. Victoria Lang. Beside her, a younger woman, mid-20s, glasses, her face pale and her hands trembling as she clutched a folder to her chest. The assistant. And at the far end of the table, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a wine glass in his hand, smirking like he'd just won something. Richard. Every eye in the room turned to Ethan as he stepped inside. He didn't belong here. His button-down was clean but cheap. His slacks were off the rack. His shoes were polished but worn. He looked like what he was, someone who worked for a living. The maitre d' appeared at his elbow, hissing, Sir, you can't be in here. Ethan ignored him. He walked across the room, his boots silent on the carpet, his toolbox forgotten somewhere in the kitchen. He walked to the assistant, who was standing frozen beside Victoria, her eyes wide and glassy with unshed tears. He pulled out an empty chair, gestured to it. Sit. She didn't move. Please, he said quietly. Sit down. She sat. Ethan picked up a glass of water from the table, someone's glass, he didn't care whose, and placed it in front of her. Then he looked at Richard. The room was so quiet he could hear the candles flickering. Ethan spoke 3 words. She's with me. Richard's smirk didn't fade immediately. It hung there for a second, frozen like a photograph, while his brain tried to process what had just happened. Around the table, 60 pairs of eyes swiveled between Ethan and the trembling assistant, waiting for someone to explain the punchline. But there was no punchline. Ethan stood perfectly still, one hand resting on the back of the assistant's chair. His expression wasn't angry, wasn't confrontational. It was simply present, the kind of calm that comes from a man who said exactly what he meant and has no intention of taking it back. Victoria Lang broke the silence first. Her voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it, curiosity mixed with something sharper. I'm sorry, who are you? Ethan Cole. I'm the technician. The technician. She repeated it like she was testing the weight of the word. And you thought it appropriate to interrupt a private corporate event to... what exactly? To make sure she's okay. Ethan nodded toward the assistant, who was staring at the water glass like it might contain answers. Richard set down his wine glass with a deliberate clink. This is absurd. Victoria, are you going to let the help lecture us on... Her name's not the help, Ethan said. His voice stayed level, but something in it made Richard's mouth snap shut. And she's not incompetent. She made a mistake. People do that. A mistake that wasted my time, Richard shot back, in front of my entire team. Then you could have mentioned it privately. You didn't have to humiliate her in front of 60 people. A woman at the far end of the table, designer glasses, pearl necklace, leaned toward her companion and whispered something. He whispered back. The sound rippled outward like a stone dropped in water. Victoria's eyes hadn't left Ethan. She was studying him now, the way you might study an equation that didn't add up. Mr. Cole, she said carefully, I appreciate your concern, but this is a professional matter between myself and my staff. It doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone in this room. Excuse me? Ethan looked around the table. Faces that cost a fortune to maintain. Watches that cost more than cars. People who'd spent their entire lives accumulating power and money and influence, who'd learned to measure worth in stock options and quarterly earnings. You all saw what he did, Ethan said. You heard him tear into her for a paperwork mix-up, and most of you laughed. Some of you are still smiling. The smiles vanished. So yeah, Ethan continued, it concerns all of you because right now you're deciding what kind of people you are. The kind who let that slide, or the kind who don't. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier. The kind of silence that happens when someone says the thing everyone was thinking but no one wanted to acknowledge. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. Victoria, if you're going to allow your maintenance staff to insult your investors, sit down, Richard. Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. Not loud, but absolute. Richard froze halfway out of his chair. What? I said sit down. For a moment, Ethan thought the man might refuse. His face went red, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. But he sat. Victoria turned to the assistant, who still hadn't looked up from the water glass. Sophie. The assistant, Sophie, flinched at her name. Look at me. Slowly, Sophie raised her head. Her eyes were glassy, her mascara smudged at the corners. Did you bring the wrong contract? Victoria asked. Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Was it intentional? No, I grabbed the folder from your office and I thought, I checked 3 times, but I must have, her voice broke. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Victoria nodded once. Then we're done with it. Richard received the correct contract 10 minutes later, signed it, and the deal is moving forward. The mistake cost us nothing but a few minutes of time. Is that correct, Richard? Richard's jaw tightened. Technically, yes, but then there's nothing more to discuss. Victoria looked back at Sophie. Take 5 minutes. Get some air. When you come back, I want you at this table, not standing behind me like a coat rack, sitting with everyone else. Sophie blinked. I what? You've been working on this deal for 3 months. You know the numbers better than I do. If the investors have questions, you're going to help me answer them. Understood? Yes. Thank you. Sophie's voice cracked again, but this time it wasn't from fear. She stood, her legs unsteady, and walked toward the exit. As she passed Ethan, she whispered 2 words. Thank you. He nodded. When Sophie was gone, Victoria turned her full attention back to Ethan. Her expression was unreadable, part curiosity, part calculation, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that had just appeared in the middle of her evening. You have a daughter, she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan's spine stiffened slightly. How do you know that? You said she when you walked in, and there's a crayon stain on your sleeve. He glanced down. She was right. Purple, from Lily's homework earlier. Yeah, he said. I have a daughter. How old? 8? Victoria nodded slowly. And you brought her here tonight. Didn't have a choice. I needed the work. Most people would have left her at home. Or with a sitter. Sitters cost money. Something flickered across Victoria's face, too fast for Ethan to read. She glanced at the maitre d', who was hovering near the kitchen door like he wasn't sure whether to call security or wait for instructions. Is your daughter in the staff room? Victoria asked. Yeah. Bring her out here. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not necessary. I'm not asking you to parade her around. I'm asking you to bring her here so she's not sitting alone in a closet while her father gets fired for insubordination. I'm fired? Not yet. Victoria's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. But you walked into a corporate event, interrupted a CEO in front of her investors, and implied that we're all morally bankrupt. So you're somewhere between employed and escorted out by security. Bringing your daughter might tip the scales in your favor. Ethan didn't move. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Or you can leave now and I'll have someone else on standby for the rest of the evening. Your choice. He wanted to tell her where to shove her choice. Wanted to walk out, take Lily's hand, and leave these people to their expensive food and their cheap cruelty. But double rate was double rate. And Lily's school fees were due next week. I'll get her, he said. He walked back through the kitchen, past chefs who pretended not to notice him, past Mara, who gave him a small, shaky smile, and into the staff room where Lily was bent over her homework, tongue poking out in concentration. She looked up when he entered. Are you in trouble? Maybe. Come on. Where are we going? Dining room. Her eyes widened. But you said I had to stay out of sight. Plans changed. She gathered her books and pencils, stuffed them into her backpack, and followed him out. When they reached the dining room, every head turned again. But this time the stares were different, softer. A few of the women at the table smiled, genuine smiles, not the kind that hid knives. Lily stayed close to Ethan's side, one hand gripping his. Victoria stood from her seat at the head of the table. What's your name? Lily. It's nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Victoria. She gestured to an empty chair near the center of the table. Would you like to sit down? We have dessert coming soon. Do you like chocolate? Lily looked up at Ethan. He gave a small nod. I like chocolate, Lily said quietly. Then you're in luck. Our chef makes the best chocolate souffle in the city. Victoria glanced at Ethan. You can sit next to her, unless you prefer to stand there scowling at everyone all night. A few people laughed. Real laughter this time, not cruel. Ethan pulled out the chair for Lily, then sat beside her. It was surreal. A blue-collar technician and his 8-year-old daughter sitting at a table surrounded by millionaires and investors in a restaurant where the appetizers cost more than a week's groceries. Lily sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes wide as she took in the chandeliers, the flowers, the sheer excess of everything. Victoria returned to her seat and picked up her wine glass. Now, where were we? Richard cleared his throat. He looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Victoria, I think we should discuss this partnership further before... I think we've discussed enough for tonight, Richard. Victoria's tone was pleasant, but her eyes were hard. The contracts are signed. The deal is done. Unless you'd like to reconsider? Richard's face went red again. No, of course not. Good. Sophie returned a few minutes later, her face washed, her composure mostly restored. When she saw Ethan and Lily sitting at the table, she stopped mid-step, her mouth opening in surprise. Victoria waved her over. Sophie, sit. Sophie sat. She was 2 seats down from Ethan, close enough that he could see her hand shaking as she unfolded her napkin. The servers brought out the soufflés, delicate towers of chocolate that looked too beautiful to eat. Lily stared at hers like it might vanish if she blinked. Go ahead, Ethan murmured. She picked up her spoon, took a tentative bite, and her entire face lit up. Across the table, a man in his 30s, tech startup type, rumpled blazer, expensive sneakers, leaned forward. So, Ethan, what kind of technician are you? The kind that fixes things when they break? Refrigeration? HVAC? Whatever needs fixing. You own a business? Freelance. The man nodded thoughtfully. Ever thought about scaling up? Hiring a team? Ethan almost laughed. Can't afford to scale up when you're living paycheck to paycheck. The honesty seemed to catch the man off guard. He blinked, glanced at his companion, a woman with purple hair and sleeve tattoos, then back at Ethan. Fair point, he said. The woman leaned in. Your daughter's adorable, by the way. Thanks. How old? 8. Smart kid? Ethan looked at Lily, who was savoring her souffle like it was the most important thing in the world. Smarter than me, the woman smiled. I believe it. The conversation drifted after that. Business talk, mostly. Quarterly projections, market trends, acquisition rumors. Ethan didn't understand half of it, and he didn't try to. He just kept one eye on Lily, making sure she was okay, making sure no one said anything that would make her feel small. But no one did. If anything, the mood in the room had shifted. The cruelty from earlier, the laughter, the mockery, had been replaced by something quieter, more careful. Like Ethan's 3 words had reminded them that other people were watching, that their actions had weight. Victoria caught his eye from across the table. She raised her glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement. He didn't return the gesture, but he nodded once. When the dessert plates were cleared, Victoria stood again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a productive evening. I look forward to what we'll build together. Applause, polite, measured. People began to stand, gathering coats and phones, exchanging business cards and handshakes. The event was winding down. Ethan stood, took Lily's hand. Come on, baby, time to go. But before they could leave, Victoria appeared at his side. Mr. Cole, a word? He hesitated. I need to get her home. It'll only take a minute. Lily tugged on his hand. I need to use the bathroom again. Victoria gestured to Sophie, who'd been hovering nearby. Sophie, would you mind? Sophie nodded quickly. Of course. Come on, Lily. Lily followed her, glancing back at Ethan once before disappearing into the hallway. Victoria waited until they were out of earshot, then turned to Ethan. Walk with me. They moved toward the quieter end of the dining room, away from the lingering guests. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble floor. She stopped near the windows where the city lights glittered beyond the glass. You made quite an impression tonight, she said. Wasn't trying to. I know, that's what makes it interesting. She studied him for a long moment. Tell me something. When you walked in here and said those 3 words, she's with me, what were you trying to accomplish? Honestly? Honestly. I was tired of watching people get shit on for no reason. Victoria's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Eloquent. I'm not here to be eloquent. I'm here to fix refrigerators. You did more than that tonight. Ethan shrugged. Maybe. Victoria turned to face the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I started this company 12 years ago, borrowed money from everyone I knew, maxed out every credit card, slept in my car for 3 months because I couldn't afford rent and office space. Ethan didn't respond. He wasn't sure why she was telling him this. I built Langtech from nothing, she continued, and somewhere along the way I forgot what that felt like. To be invisible, to be dismissed, to have people look through you like you're not even there. You remembered tonight, because of you. She turned back to him. Richard's been a problem for months, condescending to staff, making inappropriate comments, throwing his weight around because he knows we need his funding. I've ignored it because it was easier than confronting it, because I told myself it wasn't my job to manage his behavior. It is your job, Ethan said quietly. When you're the one in charge, everything's your job. Victoria nodded slowly. You're right, and I should have handled it sooner. She paused. For what it's worth, I'm terminating our partnership with Richard's firm, effective immediately. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That seems extreme. No, letting him treat people like that was extreme. This is just correcting the mistake. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket, held it out. I want you to call me. He didn't take the card. Why? Because I could use someone on my team who's willing to tell me when I'm wrong. Someone who doesn't care about titles or hierarchy. Someone who sees people, not positions. I fix refrigerators, Ethan said again. You do more than that. You just proved it. She pressed the card into his hand. Call me. Or don't. But the offer stands. Before he could respond, Lily reappeared with Sophie, chattering about the fancy soap in the bathroom. Sophie was smiling, really smiling, not the terrified half-smile from earlier. Victoria knelt down to Lily's level. It was very nice to meet you, Lily. Thank you for sharing your dad with us tonight. Lily beamed. Thank you for the chocolate. Any time. Ethan pocketed the business card without looking at it. He took Lily's hand, nodded once to Victoria, and walked toward the exit. They were almost to the door when Sophie caught up to them, slightly breathless. Mr. Cole? He stopped. Yeah? She hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket, a folded $20 bill. For Lily, for the milkshake. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. She pressed it into his hand before he could argue. Thank you for what you did. No one's ever. Her voice caught. Just thank you. She hurried back toward the dining room before he could respond. Ethan looked down at the 20, then at Lily, who was watching him with those wide, trusting eyes. Can I still get a milkshake? She asked. He smiled. Yeah, baby, you can get a milkshake. They drove home in comfortable silence, Lily humming tunelessly beside him, her backpack at her feet. The city lights blurred past the windows. The truck's heater rattled and coughed, but it worked well enough. When they pulled into their apartment complex, cracked asphalt, flickering streetlights, a dumpster that overflowed every Thursday, Lily was half asleep, her head lolling against the seatbelt. Ethan carried her inside, her arms looped around his neck, her breath warm against his shoulder. He tucked her into bed, still wearing her clothes, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and kissed her forehead. Love you, Lil. Love you too, Dad. In the kitchen, he made himself a cup of instant coffee, sat at the table, and pulled out Victoria's business card. Victoria Lang, CEO, Lang Tech Industries. A phone number, an email address, embossed letters that probably cost more than his truck's last oil change. He should throw it away, should forget the whole night and go back to fixing refrigerators and staying invisible. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Sophie's hands had shaken when she thanked him. Maybe it was the look on Victoria's face when she talked about sleeping in her car. Maybe it was the simple fact that tonight, for the first time in a long time, Ethan had felt like his voice mattered. He set the card on the counter, propped against the coffee can where he'd see it every morning. Then he went to bed. Across the city, in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked like art, Victoria Lang stood alone in her living room, staring at nothing. She'd dismissed her driver, sent her assistant home, poured herself a glass of wine she wasn't drinking. The evening played on repeat in her mind. Ethan's face, his calm, the way he'd placed that water glass in front of Sophie like it was the most natural thing in the world. She's with me. 3 words. That's all it took to stop a room full of people who were used to being unstoppable. Victoria set down her wine glass and walked to her office, a room lined with awards and framed magazine covers, certificates, and accolades that documented her rise from nothing to everything. On the desk sat a photograph, the only personal item in the entire room. A man in his 60s, weathered face, kind eyes, standing beside a younger Victoria, her father. He'd been a bus driver, worked double shifts to put her through college, never lived to see her build Lang Tech, never got to witness her success. He died 12 years ago, in an accident. Victoria picked up the photograph, traced her father's face with one finger. She'd been so focused on building, on succeeding, on proving that she could rise above her beginnings, that she'd forgotten the lessons he'd taught her. Treat people right. Stand up for the ones who can't stand up for themselves. Don't let power make you cruel. Tonight, a stranger, a technician with grease on his hands and a daughter with crayon stains, had reminded her of those lessons. And something else. Something about Ethan Cole felt familiar. Not his face, but his presence, the way he carried himself, the quiet strength, like someone she used to know. Victoria set the photograph back on the desk and returned to the living room. Sleep wouldn't come tonight. She could feel it already, the restlessness, the questions circling in her mind like sharks. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, found the number for her head of security. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Miss Lang, it's late. I need you to look into someone for me." "Who?" "Ethan Cole, freelance technician. Has a daughter 8 years old. That's all I know." A pause. "What am I looking for?" "Anything, everything. Background, employment history, family. I want to know who he is." "May I ask why?" Victoria hesitated. "Call it instinct. I'll have something for you by Monday." "Thank you." She ended the call, set the phone down, and stood at the window, looking out over the city that had made her rich and powerful and lonely. Somewhere out there, Ethan Cole was probably asleep. Probably didn't own a penthouse or a security team or a company worth billions, but tonight he'd been the one with power. And Victoria couldn't stop thinking about why. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind that turned the city gray and made everything smell like wet asphalt and regret. Ethan woke to the sound of it drumming against the window, relentless and cold. Lily was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, her homework spread out beside her like she was cramming for finals instead of 3rd grade. "You're up early," Ethan said, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mrs. Patterson's giving a quiz today. On multiplication." "You know your times tables." "I know, but I want to get 100. He poured himself coffee from the pot he'd set to brew the night before. The apartment was cold. The landlord had promised to fix the heating 3 weeks ago, but promises didn't keep you warm. Ethan made a mental note to check the radiator himself when he had time. If he had time. His phone buzzed on the counter, a text from the manager at Bellamy's. "Thank you for Saturday. Payment processed. Let me know if you're available for next weekend's event." Ethan deleted the message. He wasn't going back to Bellamy's. Wasn't interested in watching rich people pretend to be human for a few hours before returning to their gilded towers. But Victoria's business card was still propped against the coffee can, exactly where he'd left it. He picked it up, turned it over in his fingers. The embossed letters caught the light. Call me. He set it back down. Lily finished her cereal, rinsed the bowl, and stuffed her homework into her backpack with the efficiency of someone twice her age. Dad, can you quiz me on the sevens? Sure, 7 times 4, 28. 7 times 8, 56. 7 times 12. She paused, her face scrunching in concentration. 84. That's my girl. He drove her to school through streets slick with rain, the wipers on his truck protesting every sweep. When they pulled up to the drop-off zone, Lily unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't get out immediately. Dad? Yeah? That lady from Saturday, Victoria, she was nice. Yeah, she was. Are you going to call her? Ethan glanced at his daughter, 8 years old and already reading him better than he read himself. I don't know yet. She gave you her card. That means she wants you to call. It's not that simple, Lil. Why not? Because people like Victoria Lang don't actually want people like me in their lives. Because that card is probably sitting in a dozen other pockets right now, handed out like candy at Halloween, because I've got nothing to offer someone who runs a billion-dollar company. But he didn't say any of that. I'll think about it, he said instead. Lily nodded, kissed his cheek, and hopped out into the rain. She waved once before disappearing through the school's front doors, swallowed by the crowd of kids and parents and the organized chaos of Monday morning. Ethan sat in the truck for a minute, watching the rain, then pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. 3 repair requests. One from a landlord whose tenant had reported a broken water heater. One from a restaurant owner whose walk-in freezer was making ominous grinding noises. One from a woman whose dishwasher had flooded her kitchen. He took all 3 jobs. Rent was due Friday. By noon, he was elbow-deep in someone else's plumbing, lying on his back in a crawl space that smelled like mildew and something that might have been a dead rat. The water heater was older than Lily, held together with rust and wishful thinking. His phone rang. Unknown number. He ignored it. It rang again. He swore under his breath, wiped his hands on his jeans, and answered. Yeah? Mr. Cole? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Who's this? My name is Andrea Frost. I'm calling on behalf of Victoria Lang. Ethan sat up so fast he hit his head on a pipe. Ow! Shit, what? Ms. Lang would like to meet with you. Are you available this afternoon? I'm working. She's willing to work around your schedule. Why does she want to meet? She didn't specify, but she asked me to tell you it's important. Ethan rubbed the back of his head where he'd smacked it. I don't know. She's offering to compensate you for your time. Your standard hourly rate plus travel. He almost laughed. She doesn't know my hourly rate. $80 an hour. Is that incorrect? It was exactly correct, which meant Victoria, or someone working for her, had done homework. When? He asked. 3 o'clock. Her office. I'll text you the address. I have another job at 4. This shouldn't take more than an hour. Ethan closed his eyes, weighing options he didn't fully understand. He should say no. Should finish his jobs, pick up Lily from school, go home, and forget that Saturday night ever happened. But curiosity was a hell of a thing. Fine, he said. 3 o'clock. Excellent. I'll let Miss Lang know. The call ended. 10 seconds later, a text arrived with an address in the financial district, the kind of neighborhood where Ethan's truck looked like a health code violation. He finished the water heater repair in 40 minutes, collected payment from the landlord, cash, no receipt, and drove across the city through traffic that moved like molasses. Langtech's headquarters was a glass tower that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never heard of right angles. All curves and reflective surfaces, reaching 30 stories into the gray sky like a middle finger to gravity. Ethan parked in the visitor lot, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked like what he was, a guy who'd spent the morning fixing other people's broken shit. Grease under his fingernails, flannel shirt that had seen better decades, boots that left tracks. He almost turned around, but Andrea Frost was waiting in the lobby when he walked in, her heels clicking against marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than his entire apartment. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. She was mid-40s, immaculate suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Ms. Lang is expecting you. This way. She led him to an elevator with walls made of glass, offering a view of the city as they rose. Ethan kept his eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the vertigo. They stopped on the 28th floor. The doors opened onto an office space that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought comfort was weakness. Everything was steel and glass and hard edges. People moved through it like they were afraid to make noise. Andrea led him to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that made the elevator ride look quaint. Victoria stood behind her desk, phone pressed to her ear, one hand gesturing as she spoke. When she saw Ethan, she held up a finger, 1 minute, and continued her conversation. I don't care what the projections say, Marcus. If we can't deliver by Q2, we don't promise Q2. I'm not interested in explaining to our clients why we overpromised and underdelivered. She paused, listening. Then hire more engineers. Yes, I know they're expensive, so is losing credibility. Another pause. Good. I'll expect an update by Friday. She ended the call, set the phone down, and turned her full attention to Ethan. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Your assistant made it sound important. It is. She gestured to a chair, leather, uncomfortable looking. Please, sit. He sat. Victoria remained standing, hands clasped behind her back, studying him the way a scientist might study a particularly interesting specimen. I had you investigated, she said. Ethan's spine stiffened. Excuse me? Nothing invasive, just a background check. Employment history, financials, legal records. She paused. You're clean, not even a parking ticket. Was I supposed to be dirty? Most people have something to hide. I'm not most people. Victoria's mouth twitched, almost a smile. No, you're not. She moved to the window, hands still clasped behind her back. Ethan Cole, 34 years old, single father. Dropped out of community college 15 years ago to care for your infant daughter after her mother left. You've worked as a mechanic, handyman, HVAC technician, plumber, electrician, basically every trade that doesn't require a 4-year degree. You pay your taxes. You've never filed for bankruptcy, though you came close twice. You rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a building that's been cited for code violations 3 times in the past year. Your daughter attends public school and maintains straight A's. Ethan's jaw tightened. You missed the part where I don't appreciate being spied on. I needed to know who you are. Why? Victoria turned from the window. Because 12 years ago, my father was in a car accident. A semi-truck lost control on the interstate, jackknifed across 3 lanes. My father's car was hit head-on. The driver was killed instantly. My father should have been too. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew where this was going. But someone pulled him out, Victoria continued. The car was on fire, gasoline everywhere. This person, a stranger, smashed the window, cut the seatbelt, and dragged my father out 30 seconds before the whole thing exploded. Then he disappeared. No name, no statement, just gone. The rain hammered against the windows. Ethan didn't speak. My father spent 3 weeks in the hospital, Victoria said. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, burns on his hands and arms. But he lived. And when he was finally coherent enough to talk, he told me about the man who saved him. Young guy, early 20s, wearing a mechanic's uniform, had grease under his fingernails and a scar on his left forearm. She walked toward Ethan, stopped a few feet away. Roll up your sleeve. He didn't move. Please. Slowly, Ethan pushed up the sleeve of his flannel shirt, revealing the scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. A jagged line, pale against his skin. 15 years old. Victoria exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a decade. It was you. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. It was me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence, relentless and cold. Why didn't you stay? Victoria asked. Why didn't you give a statement to the police? Because I had a 6-month-old daughter at home and no one to watch her. Because I was already late for work. Because I didn't think it mattered. It mattered. Not to me. I did what anyone would have done. Most people wouldn't have. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. Most people would have called 911 and waited, or driven past and pretended they didn't see. You risked your life. Your dad was trapped. The car was on fire. There wasn't time to wait. Victoria returned to her desk, opened a drawer and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. Old, worn, the kind of thing that had been carried in a pocket for years. She set it on the desk between them. My father kept a journal every day for 40 years. When he died, 8 years ago, heart attack, I inherited all of them. 40 volumes of his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. She tapped the notebook. This one's from the year of the accident. He wrote about you. A lot. Ethan stared at the notebook like it might bite him. He didn't know your name, Victoria said. But he wanted to find you. Wanted to thank you. He spent months trying to track you down, but you disappeared. No one at the scene got a good look at you. The police had nothing. I didn't want to be found. Why not? Because I didn't save your dad so I could get thanked for it. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. Victoria picked up the notebook, flipped it open, and began to read aloud. The man who pulled me from the fire had kind eyes. Scared eyes. But he didn't hesitate. He didn't think about himself. He just acted. I owe him my life, and I don't even know his name. If I ever find him, I want to tell him that he gave me more than survival. He gave me the chance to see my daughter succeed, to watch her build something extraordinary, to know that the world still has people who do the right thing, even when no one's watching. Her voice broke on the last sentence. She closed the notebook, set it down. He died before Langtech became what it is now, she said, but he knew I was building something. He believed in me, and I got to tell him that because of you. Ethan didn't know what to say, didn't trust himself to speak. Victoria wiped her eyes quickly, professionally. I brought you here because I wanted to thank you. Face to face, no intermediaries, no corporate bullshit. Just thank you for my father, for me. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. Ethan stood. I should go. I have another job. Wait. Victoria reached into her desk again, pulled out an envelope. This is for you. He didn't take it. I don't want your money. It's not money. It's a contract, a job offer. That stopped him. What kind of job? Head of operations. You'd oversee facilities management for all Langtech properties. Maintenance, repairs, vendor relations, everything. 6-figure salary, full benefits, college fund for Lily. Ethan's mouth went dry. You're joking. I don't joke about business. I'm not qualified for that. You're more qualified than half the people I've hired with MBAs and zero common sense. You know how things work. You know how to fix what's broken. And more importantly, you know how to treat people. I fix refrigerators. You did more than that on Saturday. You reminded a room full of powerful people that power isn't an excuse for cruelty. That's a skill I can't teach. Ethan shook his head. I can't. This is. Think about it. Victoria pushed the envelope toward him. The offer's real. No strings. No expectations beyond doing the job well. And if you decide it's not for you, there's no hard feelings. He picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than it should. I need to go, he said again. Victoria nodded. Thank you for coming. And Ethan? He stopped at the door. My father would have liked you. He didn't respond, just walked out, past Andrea Frost's desk, past the glass elevator, down 28 floors to the lobby where his truck was parked next to BMWs and Teslas. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the envelope. Inside was a contract, 12 pages, dense legal language he'd need a lawyer to parse. But the salary was right there on page 3, black and white and impossible. More money than he'd made in the last 5 years combined. He could move, get Lily into a better school, fix the truck, or buy a new one. Stop choosing between heat and groceries. But it would mean leaving behind everything he knew, stepping into a world where he didn't belong, where people like Richard saw him as less than, where every day would be a fight to prove he deserved to be there. His phone buzzed. A text from the restaurant owner. Freezer's making noise again. Can you come sooner? Ethan looked at the contract, looked at the text. He started the truck. The freezer repair took 90 minutes. The problem was a worn compressor belt. Easy fix, but the owner insisted on standing over Ethan's shoulder the entire time, asking questions and offering theories that were universally wrong. By the time Ethan finished, he was late picking up Lily from school. She was waiting on the front steps with her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who gave Ethan the kind of look that said this wasn't the first time he'd been late. "Sorry," he muttered. "Work ran long." "It's fine," Mrs. Patterson said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Lily did very well on her quiz today. Perfect score." Lily beamed. "That's my girl." Ethan ruffled her hair. "Come on, let's go." In the truck, Lily buckled herself in and immediately launched into a detailed account of her day: the quiz, recess, the boy who'd tried to trade his pudding cup for her granola bar. Ethan listened with half his attention. The other half was stuck on Victoria's office. The notebook. The contract. "Dad, you're not listening." He glanced at her. "I'm listening." "What did I just say?" "Something about pudding." She rolled her eyes. "You're distracted." "Sorry, just thinking." "About the lady? Victoria?" He didn't answer. "You saw her today, didn't you? How do you know that?" "You got that look, like when you're trying to fix something and you're not sure if it's going to work." 8 years old and reading him like a manual. "She offered me a job," he said. Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? What kind of job?" "A big one, at her company." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know." "Why not?" "Because it's complicated, Lil." Grown-ups always say that when they mean they're scared. Ethan pulled into their apartment complex, parked in his usual spot near the dumpster. He turned off the engine but didn't get out. "You're right," he said. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of failing, of not being good enough, of taking you into a situation where we don't belong and screwing it all up." Lily unbuckled her seatbelt, turned to face him fully. "Dad, you're good at everything. You fix stuff nobody else can fix. You help people. You're the best dad ever." "I'm not." "You are." She said it with such certainty that Ethan's throat tightened. "And if that lady thinks you're good enough, maybe you should believe her." He looked at his daughter, at her earnest face, her complete and total faith in him. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't always notice." He laughed despite himself. "Fair point." They went inside. Ethan made dinner, spaghetti again, because it was cheap and Lily actually ate it without complaint. She did her homework at the kitchen table while he washed dishes, the envelope from Victoria sitting on the counter like a live grenade. After Lily went to bed, Ethan sat on the couch and read the contract. All 12 pages. The salary. The benefits. The education fund for Lily that would cover college. And then some. It was real. He pulled out his phone, stared at Victoria's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then he set the phone down, stood, and walked to Lily's room. She was asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, her face peaceful. He thought about the last 15 years, the late nights, the missed school events, the times he'd chosen work over her because he had no choice, the way she'd never complained, never asked for more than he could give. She deserved better. He went back to the living room, picked up his phone, and hit call before he could change his mind. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Ethan?" "Yeah." "It's almost 10. Is everything okay?" "The job," he said. "I'll take it." A pause, then, "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Good. Come by the office tomorrow. We'll finalize the details." "Okay." "And Ethan? You won't regret this." He hoped she was right. Ethan woke up the next morning with the kind of regret that comes from making life-altering decisions at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. He lay in bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere he'd never been, and wondered what the hell he'd just committed to. 6 figures. Benefits. A world he didn't understand filled with people who spoke a language he'd never learned. His phone buzzed. A text from Andrea Frost. "Miss Lang expects you at 9 a.m. Bring 2 forms of ID and your banking information for payroll setup." Payroll setup. Like this was real. Like he was actually going to walk into that glass tower and pretend he belonged there. He dragged himself out of bed, made coffee, and stared at his closet like it might offer answers. He didn't own a suit. Didn't own dress shoes that weren't scuffed beyond salvation. The best he could do was the same slacks and button-down he'd worn to Bellamy's, paired with a jacket that didn't quite fit because he'd bought it at Goodwill 3 years ago. It would have to do. Lily appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. You look nervous, she said. I'm not nervous. You're doing that thing with your jaw, the clicky thing. He stopped grinding his teeth. I'm fine. It's going to be okay, Dad. When did you become the parent? She grinned. Someone has to be. He dropped her at school 20 minutes early because he needed to be at Langtech by 9, and traffic was already a nightmare. She kissed his cheek and bounded toward the building without looking back, confident in a way that made his chest ache. The drive downtown took 45 minutes. By the time Ethan pulled into the visitor lot at Langtech, his hands were sweating and his stomach felt like he'd swallowed rocks. Andrea Frost met him in the lobby again, her expression professionally pleasant and entirely unreadable. Mr. Cole? Right on time. Yeah. Ms. Lang is in a meeting, but she'll join us shortly. First, we need to handle some paperwork. She gestured toward the elevator. This way. They rode up to the 15th floor this time. Human resources occupied the entire level. Cubicles and glass-walled offices, people in business casual typing at computers that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. Andrea led him to a conference room with a view of the financial district and a table that could seat 20. A stack of papers waited at one end, neatly organized with sticky tabs marking where he needed to sign. I'll give you a moment to review, Andrea said. Would you like coffee? I'm good. She left. Ethan sat down and started reading. Employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, benefits enrollment, tax forms. Page after page of legal language that might as well have been written in Sanskrit. He was halfway through when the door opened and Victoria walked in, followed by a man in his 60s. Gray hair, sharp suit, the kind of face that had seen every boardroom trick and survived them all. Ethan, Victoria said, this is Robert Chen, our Chief Operating Officer. He'll be working closely with you as you transition into the role. Robert extended a hand. His grip was firm, measuring. Mr. Cole, Victoria speaks highly of you. She shouldn't. I haven't done anything yet. Robert's mouth twitched. Honest. I like that. He pulled out a chair, sat across from Ethan. Let me be direct. Victoria's hired you for a position that typically requires a decade of corporate experience and an MBA from somewhere impressive. You have neither. That's going to cause problems. Robert, Victoria started. Let me finish. Robert's eyes stayed on Ethan. People are going to question your qualifications. They're going to assume you're here because of nepotism or favoritism or some other reason that has nothing to do with competence. They're going to test you, undermine you, wait for you to fail. Then why are you telling me this? Ethan asked. Because I want to know if you're going to fold the first time someone makes you feel small, or if you're going to prove them wrong. Ethan leaned back in his chair. I've spent 15 years being invisible to people who think their money makes them better than me. I'm used to being underestimated. Being used to it isn't the same as handling it. I pulled a man out of a burning car while everyone else stood around with their phones out. I raised a kid by myself while working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. I've handled worse than corporate politics. Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Then we'll get along fine. He stood, extended his hand again. Welcome to Langtech, Mr. Cole. Don't make me regret not fighting this harder. He left. Victoria sat down in the chair Robert had vacated, folding her hands on the table. He's blunt, she said. I appreciate blunt. He's also right. This won't be easy. I didn't think it would be. Victoria tapped the stack of papers. Sign these and you start Monday. Your office is on the 12th floor. You'll have an assistant, access to our vendor network, and a discretionary budget for facilities improvements. Robert will walk you through the systems, introduce you to the team. Any questions? Yeah, why me? I told you. No. Really, why me? You could have thanked me for saving your dad with a handshake and a gift basket. You didn't have to offer me a job I'm not qualified for. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it before. When I was building this company, I had investors tell me I wasn't smart enough, wasn't ruthless enough, wasn't man enough to succeed. They saw a bus driver's daughter and assumed I'd fail, but I didn't. And you know why? Ethan waited. Because one person believed in me when it mattered. My father. He didn't care that I didn't have an MBA or a trust fund. He cared that I worked harder than anyone else in the room and that I treated people with respect. She met his eyes. You remind me of him. And if there's even a chance you can bring that same integrity to this company, then yes, it's worth the risk. Ethan picked up the pen, clicked it once, and started signing. He finished the paperwork by 11. Andrea walked him back to the lobby, handed him a glossy folder containing his employee handbook, building access card, and a welcome packet that looked like it had been designed by someone who charged by the color. Your start date is Monday, 9 a.m., Andrea said. Dress code is business casual. If you have questions before then, my contact information is in the folder. Thanks. Oh, and Mr. Cole? She almost smiled. Good luck. He was going to need it. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Ethan finished his outstanding repair jobs, called his regular clients to let them know he was taking a new position, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that in 4 days, his entire life was going to change. Lily took the news better than he did. Does this mean we can move? She asked over dinner Thursday night. Eventually. Once I know the job's going to stick. Can I get my own room? You have your own room. I mean a bigger one, with a window that doesn't rattle when the wind blows. He smiled despite the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Yeah, baby, we can find you a room with a quiet window. And can we get a dog? Let's start with the room. Saturday, Ethan took Lily to the mall. She needed clothes for school, her jeans were getting short, her sneakers were falling apart, and he figured he might as well look for something he could wear to work that didn't scream, "Bought this secondhand." They spent 2 hours in stores that smelled like new fabric and played music too loud. Lily tried on jeans and sweaters, her face lighting up every time something fit. Ethan found 2 pairs of slacks, 3 button-downs, and a blazer that was on sale and only looked slightly cheap. At the register, the total made his stomach drop, but he swiped his card anyway because in 2 weeks he'd get his first paycheck from Langtech and money wouldn't be something he counted down to the dollar. He hoped. On the drive home, Lily held up one of her new sweaters, purple with a hood. This one's my favorite. Good choice. Dad? Yeah? Are you scared about Monday? He glanced at her. A little. That's okay. Grammy used to say being scared means you're doing something important. Grammy was full of good advice. Yeah. Lily folded the sweater carefully, set it on her lap. I miss her. Me too, Lil. They drove in silence for a while, the city blurring past the windows. Ethan thought about his mother, the way she'd helped him with Lily those first impossible months after her mother left, the way she'd never once made him feel like he'd failed even when he was sure he had. She would have liked Victoria, he thought, would have appreciated the way she'd stood up for Sophie, the way she'd looked Ethan in the eye and offered him a chance instead of a handout. Sunday night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible way Monday could go wrong. He'd show up, and they'd realize they'd made a mistake. He'd say something stupid in a meeting. He'd use the wrong fork at a business lunch. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep, went to the kitchen, and made coffee. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone's TV through the walls. He pulled out Victoria's father's notebook, the one she'd let him borrow, the one he'd been too afraid to open until now. The leather was soft with age. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, every entry dated, every thought preserved like amber. Ethan flipped to the section Victoria had read from. The accident, the fire, the stranger who'd pulled him free. But there was more. I've been thinking about the man who saved me, not just who he is, but why he did it. He didn't know me, had no reason to risk his life. But he did it anyway, and now I'm alive to see my daughter graduate, to watch her chase her dreams, to be here for her when she needs me. That kind of selflessness isn't common, it's the exception. And I think the world needs more exceptions. Ethan closed the notebook, pressed his palms against his eyes. He wasn't an exception. He was just a guy who'd done what anyone should have done. But reading those words, seeing how much it had meant to someone, made the weight of Monday feel a little less crushing. He went back to bed. This time, he slept. Monday morning arrived with brutal sunshine. Ethan dressed in his new clothes, checked his reflection in the bathroom mirror, and barely recognized himself. He looked like someone who worked in an office, someone who had meetings and sent emails and knew what synergy meant. He looked like an imposter. Lily knocked on the bathroom door. Dad, you look fancy. I look ridiculous. You look like a businessman. Same thing, she laughed. You're going to be great. He drove her to school first, then headed downtown. Traffic was lighter than he expected. By the time he pulled into the Langtech parking garage, it was 8:45. Andrea was waiting in the lobby. Mr. Cole, perfect timing. Your office is ready. Follow me. The 12th floor was quieter than HR had been. Fewer cubicles, more offices, people who walked like they had somewhere important to be. Andrea led him to a corner office. Not as big as Victoria's, but bigger than anywhere Ethan had ever worked. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that looked like it weighed more than his truck, a chair that probably cost what he used to make in a month. This is mine? He asked. Yes, your assistant James sits just outside. He'll handle your calendar, coordinate with vendors, and keep you organized. Robert will be by at 9:30 to start your onboarding. She left. Ethan stood in the middle of the office, feeling like he'd walked onto a movie set. There was a knock. A young man appeared in the doorway, mid-20s, glasses, nervous smile. Mr. Cole? I'm James, your assistant. Just Ethan. Right, Ethan. James held up a tablet. I've set up your calendar for the week. You have a facilities walkthrough at 10, a team meeting at 1, and a budget review with Robert at 3. I've also compiled reports on current vendor contracts, outstanding maintenance requests, and capital improvement projects. Would you like me to go over them now, or... Give me 10 minutes, Ethan said. I need to figure out where the bathroom is first. James blinked, then laughed. Down the hall, second door on the left. When he was alone, Ethan sat down at the desk, opened the reports James had mentioned, and tried to make sense of them. Numbers, spreadsheets, terms like amortization and capital expenditure that he'd never needed to know when he was fixing refrigerators. This was a mistake. He wasn't qualified for this. He was going to fail spectacularly, and Victoria was going to regret ever offering him the job, and another knock. Robert appeared, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this? He said, setting one on Ethan's desk. Thanks. Robert sat in one of the chairs across from him. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to get fired. Good. That means you're taking this seriously. Robert sipped his coffee. Let me tell you how this is going to work. For the next 2 weeks, you're going to shadow me, learn the systems, meet the team, understand how we operate. Then you're on your own. 2 weeks isn't a lot of time. No, but you're not starting from zero. You know how buildings work. You know how to manage people and solve problems. The rest is just paperwork and politics. I'm not good at politics. Neither am I. That's why we'll get along. Robert stood. Come on, let's start the walkthrough. They spent the morning touring Langtech's facilities, server rooms, break rooms, mechanical systems that kept the building running. Ethan asked questions, took notes, and tried to ignore the stares from employees who clearly knew he was the new guy and couldn't figure out why he was there. At lunch, Robert took him to the executive dining room, a space that looked like a restaurant, staffed by chefs who made food that didn't come from a microwave. You don't have to eat here every day, Robert said. But it's included in your benefits, and the food's decent. They sat at a table near the windows. Ethan ordered a sandwich that came with vegetables he couldn't identify. So, Robert said, what's your biggest concern? Ethan didn't hesitate. That I'm going to screw this up and make Victoria look bad for hiring me. Fair concern. But here's the thing. Victoria doesn't make bad calls. She's impulsive sometimes, unconventional often, but she's not stupid. If she hired you, it's because she sees something the rest of us don't, or she's paying back a debt. Robert shook his head. Victoria doesn't do favors, she does investments, and right now, she's betting on you. The weight of that settled over Ethan like a lead blanket. The afternoon was meetings. Ethan met the facilities team, a mix of engineers, contractors, and project managers who all looked at him like he was a puzzle they hadn't figured out how to solve yet. One of them, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper questions, cornered him after the meeting. So you're the guy who saved Victoria's dad. Word traveled fast. Yeah, Ethan said, and now you're head of operations. That's what the title says. She crossed her arms. No offense, but this department's been running fine without you. What exactly are you going to bring to the table? Ethan met her eyes. I don't know yet. But I'm guessing if everything was fine, Victoria wouldn't have hired someone to fix it. The woman's expression didn't change, but something in her posture softened slightly. Fair enough. I'm Denise. If you need anything, ask, but don't expect me to hold your hand. Wasn't planning on it. She walked away. Robert, who'd been watching from across the room, approached. That went better than I expected, he said. She hates me. She hates everyone, but she respects honesty. You'll be fine. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Ethan's brain felt like it had been put through a blender. He'd absorbed more information in 8 hours than he had in the last 8 months, and he was pretty sure he'd already forgotten half of it. James appeared in his doorway. Anything else you need before I head out? No, thanks. See you tomorrow. Ethan packed up his notes, turned off his computer, and headed for the elevator. The building was emptying out, people in suits and dresses, chatting about dinner plans and weekend trips, living lives that didn't involve counting pennies or fixing broken water heaters at midnight. He felt out of place, but he also felt something else. Possibility. He picked up Lily from after-school care. She'd been bouncing off the walls with questions about his first day, and took her to the diner they used to go to when money was slightly less tight. So, she asked, stealing a fry from his plate, how was it? Overwhelming. But good? I don't know yet. Ask me in a month. She grinned. You're going to be great, Dad. I know it. He hoped she was right. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Robert says you survived day 1. Well done. He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, barely. Her response came almost immediately. That's how everyone feels their first day. You'll find your footing. He wanted to believe her. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Ethan worked 12-hour days learning systems and processes, navigating office politics, trying to prove he belonged. He made mistakes, scheduled a vendor meeting during a company-wide event, approved a repair budget without running it past Robert first, called a senior engineer by the wrong name in front of the entire team. But he also started to find his rhythm. He identified inefficiencies in the maintenance workflow, renegotiated contracts with vendors who'd been overcharging for years, and earned grudging respect from Denise and her team by fixing a critical HVAC issue himself when the contractor was running late. Victoria checked in once a week. Brief meetings where she asked how he was adjusting, if he needed anything, whether Robert was being too hard on him. He's fine, Ethan said during their 3rd meeting. Tough, but fair. That's Robert. Victoria leaned back in her chair. You're doing well, by the way. Better than I expected. Low bar. Higher than you think. She paused. There's something I need to tell you. Richard, the investor from Bellamy's, he's been making noise. Asking questions about you, about why I hired you. Ethan's jaw tightened. What kind of questions? The kind designed to undermine your credibility. He's implying that you're unqualified, that this is nepotism, that I'm making poor leadership decisions. Maybe he's right. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Don't do that. Don't let him get in your head. I'm just saying, you saved my father's life. You stood up for someone who needed it when a room full of powerful people stayed silent. You've spent 2 weeks proving you can do this job. Richard can say whatever he wants, but he doesn't get to define your worth. Ethan didn't respond, but something in her words settled the knot in his chest. There's a board meeting next week, Victoria continued. You'll need to present your first quarterly facilities report. Richard will be there. He'll try to make you look incompetent. So what do I do? You show up prepared, answer his questions honestly, and don't let him rattle you. She smiled slightly. You've handled worse. The board meeting was on a Thursday. Ethan spent 3 days preparing, reviewing every line of his report, anticipating questions, rehearsing answers until they felt natural. When the day arrived, he walked into the boardroom wearing his best suit, still not expensive but better than anything he'd owned a month ago, and carrying a folder thick with data. The room was full. 20 people around a massive table, Victoria at the head, Robert beside her. And at the far end, Richard, his expression smug and expectant. Ethan presented his report. Maintenance costs down 12%. Vendor contract savings totaling $500,000. 3 major capital projects completed ahead of schedule. When he finished, Richard leaned forward. Impressive numbers, Mr. Cole. Almost too impressive. How do we know they're accurate? Ethan met his eyes. Because I can show you the invoices, the contracts, and the before and after data for every project. Would you like me to walk you through them? Richard's smile didn't waver. That won't be necessary, but I'm curious. What qualifies you to oversee operations for a billion-dollar company? You were fixing refrigerators 6 months ago. The room went quiet. Every eye turned to Ethan. He didn't flinch. You're right, 6 months ago I was fixing refrigerators, and toilets, and HVAC systems. I've worked in more buildings than most people in this room will ever see. I know how they work, how they break, and how to fix them. That's my qualification. But you have no corporate experience. I have 15 years of experience solving problems. That's what this job is. And judging by these results, I'd say I'm doing it pretty well. Richard's smile faded. He sat back, said nothing. Victoria's voice cut through the silence. Any other questions? No one spoke. Then we're adjourned. Thank you, Ethan. He walked out of the boardroom, his heart pounding, his hand shaking slightly. Robert caught up to him in the hallway. Well done, he said. I thought I was going to throw up. You didn't. That's what counts. That night, Ethan came home to find Lily asleep on the couch, her homework scattered around her. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe. They were going to be okay. He was going to make sure of it. 3 months into the job, Ethan stopped feeling like an imposter every time he walked through Langtech's doors. He still didn't love the suits or the meetings that could have been emails, but he'd found his footing. The facilities team respected him, or at least stopped questioning his every decision. The numbers kept improving, and for the first time in 15 years, he wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. He and Lily had moved into a new apartment. 2 bedrooms, yes, but also heat that worked, windows that didn't rattle, and a neighborhood where gunshots weren't part of the ambient noise. Lily had her own room with bookshelves Ethan had built himself, painted the exact shade of purple she'd wanted. She was thriving. Straight A's still, but also friends now, real friends who came over for sleepovers and homework sessions. She'd joined the school's art club and had started talking about maybe becoming an architect someday. Ethan tried not to think about how much of that was because of Victoria's gamble on him. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed again. He was reviewing a proposal for upgrading the building's fire suppression system when James appeared in his doorway, his face pale. Ethan, you need to turn on the news. What's going on? Just turn it on. Ethan grabbed the remote, flipped on the TV mounted on his office wall. Every channel showed the same thing. Langtech's stock price in freefall. Breaking news banners screaming about fraud allegations, SEC investigations, emergency board meetings. His stomach dropped. What the hell? James stepped inside, closed the door. Someone leaked internal documents, emails, financial records. They're saying Victoria's been cooking the books, inflating revenue numbers, hiding losses. Richard's name is all over the reports. He's the one who went to the feds. Richard. Of course it was Richard. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. My office. Now. He found her standing at her window, arms crossed, staring out at the city like she was trying to memorize it before it was taken away. Robert was there too, along with 2 people Ethan didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably, based on their suits and their briefcases. Close the door, Victoria said without turning around. Ethan did. How bad is it? He asked. One of the lawyers, a woman with steel gray hair and a face that gave nothing away, answered. The SEC's opening a formal investigation. If they find evidence of fraud, Ms. Lang could face criminal charges. The company could be fined into bankruptcy. But she didn't do anything wrong, Ethan said. Right? Victoria finally turned from the window. Her face was calm, but her eyes were exhausted. The documents Richard leaked are real, but they're incomplete. Taken out of context, they look like fraud. In reality, they're standard accounting practices that he's weaponized. So we explain that, Ethan said. We show them the full picture. It's not that simple, Robert said. Richard's been planning this for months. He's got allies on the board, investors who'd rather jump ship than fight. The narrative's already out there. CEO of billion-dollar tech company caught in fraud scandal. It doesn't matter if it's true. The damage is done. Then we undo it. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I appreciate the optimism, Ethan, but this might be the fight I can't win. Bullshit. Everyone turned to look at him. You built this company from nothing, Ethan continued. You slept in your car, you maxed out every credit card. You didn't do all that just to let some entitled prick destroy it because you bruised his ego. Ethan, no, listen. Richard's doing this because you stood up to him, because you chose doing the right thing over keeping him happy. That means something. And if we roll over now, we're telling every Richard in the world that cruelty wins. The room was silent. Victoria studied him for a long moment, then she looked at the lawyers. What do we need to prove my innocence? The gray-haired lawyer flipped open her briefcase. Complete financial records, communications that show intent, testimony from anyone who can corroborate your version of events, and ideally, evidence that Richard's allegations are malicious rather than good faith concerns. How long do we have? The SEC will want to interview you within the week. After that, it depends on what they find. Victoria nodded. Then we have a week. Robert, pull every financial document we have. I want a full audit, independent and airtight. Ethan. Yeah? I need you to do something for me.
But much in these
2 hours later, Ethan was sitting in a coffee shop across from Sophie, Victoria's assistant. She looked different than she had at Bellamy's, more confident, less terrified. But when he told her why he'd asked to meet, the fear came back. You want me to testify against Richard? Not against him. Just tell the truth about what happened that night. He'll destroy me. He's got connections, money, lawyers. So does Victoria. And she's got something Richard doesn't. What's that? People who give a damn about her. Sophie stared into her coffee cup. I could lose my job, my career, everything. You could. Or you could help take down the guy who humiliated you in front of 60 people because he thought he could get away with it. She looked up at him. This isn't just about Victoria, is it? This is personal for you. Yeah, it is. Why? Ethan thought about that night. About the water glass. About 3 words that had stopped a room full of powerful people. Because somebody has to stand up, he said. Might as well be us. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and started typing. I kept a journal, she said. From that night, everything Richard said, everything he did, I was going to use it if I ever had the courage to file a complaint. She looked at Ethan. Will this help? Yeah, it'll help. Over the next 5 days, Ethan became a man on a mission. He tracked down everyone who'd been at Bellamy's that night. Investors, staff, even Mara, the server who Richard had harassed. Most were reluctant to get involved. Some hung up on him. But a few, like Sophie, like Mara, agreed to provide statements. He also dug into Richard's history, called in favors from people he'd worked with over the years, people who knew people who remembered things. What he found wasn't smoking gun evidence, but it was damning, a pattern of behavior. Other assistants Richard had belittled, other women he'd harassed, other business partners he'd turned on the moment they stopped being useful. Richard wasn't a concerned investor. He was a bully with a vendetta. On Friday afternoon, Ethan walked into Victoria's office and dropped a folder on her desk. What's this? She asked. Everything we need. She opened it. Inside were statements from Sophie, Mara, and 3 other witnesses. Financial analyses from independent auditors showing Langtech's books were clean, and a timeline of Richard's complaints, all filed within weeks of Victoria terminating their partnership. Victoria read through it slowly, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at Ethan. How did you get all this? I asked. Turns out people are willing to talk when they know someone's actually listening. This is... Her voice caught. This is more than I could have hoped for. It's the truth. That's all we need. The SEC interview happened on Monday. Victoria walked into the federal building, flanked by her lawyers, her head high, her expression calm. Ethan waited outside with Robert, drinking terrible coffee and watching the news coverage on his phone. It took 6 hours. When Victoria finally emerged, she looked exhausted, but not defeated. How'd it go? Robert asked. They asked 1,000 questions. I answered everyone, and I gave them the folder. She glanced at Ethan. They were very interested in Richard's pattern of behavior. Good. We'll know more in a few weeks, but my lawyers think we've got a shot. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. The weeks that followed were brutal. The media circus continued. Langtech's stock fluctuated wildly. Investors demanded answers. Employees whispered in hallways. But Victoria kept showing up, kept running the company, kept fighting. And slowly, the tide started to turn. An independent audit confirmed Langtech's financial records were accurate. The SEC's investigation shifted focus from Victoria to Richard's motives. News outlets that had run headlines about fraud started running corrections. Then, 5 weeks after the scandal broke, the SEC announced it was closing the investigation. No charges, no fines. Victoria Lang was cleared. The press conference was held at Langtech headquarters. Victoria stood at a podium in front of 50 reporters, cameras flashing, microphones jammed forward. "I want to thank the SEC for their thorough and fair investigation," she said, her voice steady. "I also want to address the allegations made against me. They were false. They were malicious. And they were designed to destroy a company built on integrity and hard work." A reporter shouted a question. "Do you plan to take legal action against Richard Harmon?" Victoria's smile was cold. "That's between Mr. Harmon, his lawyers, and his conscience, assuming he has one." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Another reporter. "What's next for Langtech?" "What's always been next. We build. We innovate. We treat people with respect. And we don't let bullies win." More questions, more answers. But Ethan, watching from the back of the room, stopped listening. He was watching Victoria's face, the way she held herself, the quiet strength that had carried her through hell and brought her out the other side. She caught his eye across the room, nodded once. He nodded back. After the press conference, Victoria found Ethan in his office. She closed the door, sat down across from him, and for a moment she just looked tired. "It's over," she said. "Yeah. We won." "You won. I just helped." She shook her head. You did more than help. You saved this company. You saved me." "You would have done the same." "Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to." She leaned back in the chair. "There's something I need to tell you. The board wants to offer you a position, Chief Operating Officer. Robert's retiring next year." Ethan blinked. "What?" "You've earned it. The board agrees. Hell, even the people who didn't want me to hire you agree." "I can't. I'm not." "You are. You've proven it. But before you say no, I want you to know there's no pressure. If you want to stay where you are, that's fine. If you want to leave and go back to fixing refrigerators, I'll write you the best damn reference letter you've ever seen." Ethan was quiet for a long time. He thought about the last 4 months, the mistakes, the wins, the feeling of building something that mattered. "I need to talk to Lily," he said. Victoria smiled. "Of course you do." That night, Ethan made spaghetti, again, and sat across from his daughter at their small kitchen table. "So," he said, "Victoria offered me another job." Lily looked up from her homework. "A bigger one?" "Yeah, a lot bigger." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. It would mean longer hours, more responsibility, more stress." "But you like it, the job." He thought about that. "Yeah, I do." "Then you should take it." "Just like that?" She shrugged. "You're good at it, Dad. And you're happy, I can tell." "What about you? You okay with me working more?" "As long as you still make time for me." "Always." She grinned. "Then yeah, do it." He called Victoria that night. "I'm in." "Good. You start in January. That's 3 months away. Robert needs time to transition out. And you need time to prepare. Use it wisely." He did. Over the next 3 months, Ethan learned everything Robert could teach him: strategy, leadership. The 1,000 small decisions that kept a company running. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. But he was ready. On his last day as head of operations, the facilities team threw him a party. Nothing fancy, just pizza and beer in the break room, people who'd started as skeptics and ended as allies. Denise cornered him near the end of the night. "You did good, Cole. Better than I expected. High praise from you. Don't let it go to your head." She held out her hand. "Good luck up there. And don't forget where you came from." "Not a chance." January 1st, Ethan Cole became Chief Operating Officer of Langtech Industries. His office moved to the 28th floor, 2 doors down from Victoria. His salary doubled, his responsibilities tripled, but some things stayed the same. He still picked Lily up from school when he could, still made spaghetti on Tuesdays, still drove the same truck, even though he could afford something better. And once a month he had lunch with Sophie and Mara, the two people who'd been brave enough to speak up when it mattered. It was March when Victoria called him into her office, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk about Richard," she said. Ethan's stomach tightened. "What about him?" "He's filing a defamation lawsuit against you." "Me?" "He's claiming you slandered him during the investigation, that you fabricated evidence, that you conspired to destroy his reputation." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Can he do that?" "He can file. Whether he'll win is another question." Victoria handed him a folder. "My lawyers say it's frivolous, but it'll cost time and money to fight." "So we fight." Or, Victoria pulled out another document. "We offer him a settlement, a relatively small one. Make this go away quietly." "Absolutely not." "Ethan, no, he doesn't get to do this. He tried to destroy you, failed, and now he's coming after me because I stood in his way?" "No. We take this to court. We make him prove his case, and when he can't, we make sure everyone knows what kind of person he really is." Victoria smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." The lawsuit dragged on for 6 months. Depositions, motions, endless legal wrangling. But when it finally went to trial, the case fell apart in less than a week. Richard's lawyers couldn't prove slander, couldn't show fabricated evidence, couldn't even demonstrate that Ethan had acted with malice. The judge dismissed the case, awarded legal fees to Ethan, and in her closing remarks suggested that Mr. Harmon might want to reconsider his habit of using the legal system to settle personal grievances. Ethan walked out of the courthouse with Victoria beside him, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. "How does it feel to win?" one of them yelled. Ethan stopped, turns to face the crowd. "It feels like justice," he said, "and it feels like a reminder that bullies don't always win. Sometimes, if you're willing to stand up and fight, the good guys do." He meant it. That weekend, Ethan took Lily to the park. It was one of those perfect spring days where the sun was warm but not too hot, and the sky was the kind of blue that made you forget about everything else. They sat on a bench, watching kids play on the swings, and Lily pulled out her sketchbook. She'd been drawing more lately. Buildings, mostly. Towers and bridges and structures that defied physics. "What are you working on?" Ethan asked. "A building. For when I'm an architect." "Yeah? What kind of building?" "One where people feel safe, where they don't have to worry about the heat not working or the windows breaking." She looked up at him. "Like our apartment now, but bigger." His chest tightened. "That's a good building, Lil." "I'm going to call it the Ethan Tower." He laughed. "You don't have to do that." "I want to. Because you always make me feel safe." He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "Love you, kid." "Love you too, Dad." They sat there for a while, quiet and content, watching the world move around them. And Ethan thought about the last year, about Victoria and Sophie and Mara, about Richard and the SEC and the lawsuit, about the nights he'd spent terrified he was making a mistake, and the mornings he'd woken up determined to prove he wasn't. He thought about 3 words in a restaurant, about a glass of water, about choosing to speak up when staying silent would have been easier. "She's with me." It had changed everything, not because the words themselves were magic, but because they'd been true, because in that moment Ethan had decided that Sophie's dignity mattered more than his comfort, that doing the right thing was worth the risk, and everything that followed, the job, the fight, the victory, had come from that single choice. On Monday, Ethan walked into Langtech and found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a note in Victoria's handwriting. "Thank you for everything, for my father, for my company, for reminding me what integrity looks like. I don't say this often, but I'm grateful you walked into that restaurant. The world needs more people like you. V." He folded the note, slipped it into his wallet next to Lily's school photo. Then he got to work. Because the world needed more people who stood up, more people who spoke truth, more people who chose kindness over cruelty and courage over comfort. And if Ethan Cole, Blue-collar technician, single father, guy who fixed refrigerators, could be one of those people. Then maybe others could too. That evening, he picked Lily up from school. She climbed into the truck, chattering about her day, and handed him something. "What's this?" he asked. "A drawing for Victoria, to say thank you." It was a simple sketch, crayon on construction paper. A man, a child, and a woman standing together under a rainbow. All three were smiling. "Can we drop it off at her office?" Lily asked. "Yeah, baby, we can do that." They drove to Langtech. Ethan left the drawing with the receptionist, addressed to Victoria Lang. He didn't know if she'd see it, didn't know if it would matter. But as they drove home through the city, lights coming on as the sun set, the world settling into evening, he thought maybe it would, because sometimes the smallest gestures carried the most weight. Sometimes a drawing meant more than a contract. Sometimes a glass of water mattered more than a speech. And sometimes 3 words were enough to change everything. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Victoria Lang found a drawing on her desk. She picked it up, studied the crayon figures, the rainbow, the careful way Lily had written "thank you" at the bottom. She set it on her desk, right beside the photograph of her father. And for the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't expected: peace. Not because the fight was over, not because she'd won, but because she'd been reminded of something her father had known all along, that real worth isn't measured in stock prices or quarterly earnings or corner offices. It's measured in who shows up when it matters, in who stands beside you when the world turns ugly, and who reminds you that kindness isn't weakness and integrity isn't optional. Ethan Cole had shown up, and in doing so, he'd saved more than a company. He'd saved the idea that doing the right thing still mattered, that ordinary people could still make extraordinary differences, that 3 words, spoken at the right moment, to the right person, for the right reason, could still stop the world and make it listen. "She's with me." The words echoed in Victoria's mind as she looked out over the city, the lights spreading endlessly into the distance. "She's with me." And for the first time since her father died, she felt like maybe he was still with her too. Not in the office or the awards or the billion-dollar company, but in the lessons he'd taught, in the values he'd lived, in the simple, radical act of treating people like they mattered. Victoria picked up her phone, sent a text to Ethan. "Lily's drawing is perfect. Tell her it's going on my wall." His response came a minute later. "She'll be thrilled." Victoria smiled, set down her phone, and returned to the window. The city gleamed below, full of people, full of stories, full of moments where someone could choose cruelty or kindness, silence or courage, indifference or action. And somewhere out there, a single father and his daughter were driving home, the radio playing softly, the future unwritten but no longer terrifying. Because they'd learned what Victoria's father had known all along, that the best way to face an uncertain world wasn't with power or money or status. It was with the quiet strength of knowing you'd done the right thing. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.